Once upon a time there were two little girls named Deb. One little girl grew up to be a preacher while the other grew up to be a pagan, and they both grew up to be the very best of friends. Join the preacher and the pagan as they take a fresh look at Christianity, from the inside out and the outside in.
Hello and welcome to The Preacher and the Pagan. By hook or by crook, Sod, we're back again.
We are. I can't believe another month has gone by. Where'd the time go, Deb?
Oh, most of it's been going to work, but other than that, hey.
I hear you. I hear you. So, what is our topic du jour?
Well, I'm kind of guilty of this when someone asked me what our topic was today, and I'm like, I have been on TikTok. We are going to talk about the patriarchy and how these people are using religion and all these really inherently positive things to perpetuate a system that keeps half the society down and hurts the half that's supposedly in charge.
Yep. I remember Hillary Clinton saying that, don't know what it is about religion in any of the traditions, but as soon as men get religion, the first thing they try to do is oppress women. And not a single text, and I've read them from all sorts of religions, says that's the job we're supposed to be doing. None of them. Yeah. But that's certainly what right-wing men seem to go for, isn't it?
And I'm going to be honest.
And you know what?
Pagans are not immune from this.
Okay.
There's a lot of
they're not.
positive paganism, but I promise you, I have been in groups of interfaith pagans where some jerk has just gotten a little too excited about his Norse theology and decided to go all Viking on us. And I'm like, no, thank you. Not interested in your heavy-handed patriarchy there.
No. And it is. And the thing is that if it was just men doing this, that'd be an easy target. And we saw that in the 80s. Some women tried to make it just about men, but it's not. It's the political system. And so many women internalize this, and we turn on each other. And it's so frustrating to have to try to unpack that for folks who just do not think they could possibly be swayed to hate their own gender, but it's done all the time.
And it's not even done, it's subtle too, because it's not just, attack your own gender. It's pitting, it's pitting us against each other, like we're in some kind of competition for some I don't know what. I trust me, I don't want anyone you're potentially dating, so that's not a problem. Because you're the straightest woman I know, and I'm the gayest woman you know. So there we go. It's not happening. But why do women have to be in competition? Why do men have to be in competition when cooperation works so much better?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. The patriarchy doesn't just hurt women; it hurts a lot of men too. Yeah, a dear friend of mine struggling right now with the primary man in her life. At the end of his usefulness to society, and he does not know what else to do because he's been born and bred to believe that he is supposed to be on top of all triangles at all times in perpetuity, and that's just not reality for anybody. No. But now it's a real honest to God struggle, and he is not at all a dumb person, but he has not done any of the mental work to kind of take apart the way the patriarchy has hurt him. So it's she's standing by and watching this slow degrade of someone who used to be on the top of his world. And body fails for all of us. The career fails for all of us. Families move on. Workplaces replace us. We're never always going to be the top of our game forever. It's just not going to happen.
And that's not how it's supposed to happen.
No, it's not. The patriarchy does not help men cope with that.
No.
Women, because I think we've always been having to justify our existence, we're a little better about it. But that's only because we've also had to pick up all the pieces that got dropped. But it's really rough. So anyway, this whole conversation, if I recall correctly, started because you saw TikTok, yeah.
Oh, I saw a couple.
Something called godly in it, which just is one of my pet peeves. Absolutely.
Okay.
And it's not a word you're going to hear with any regularity north of the border. I got to tell you that. It's just, I hear it through social media. It's not common parlance up here at all.
Well, one day I was strolling through the
American experiences,
honestly, and it just seemed I was on the misogyny bandwagon that day. I got one conservative gentleman in his, I'd say, late 60s, early 70s, lecturing on how women are being deluded into thinking that it's a good thing not to have children when they're 17, 18, 19, because they should be having all of their children very, very young, because it's not a good idea to wait until you're older to have children. So, okay, get them saddled down with children early and make them feel like they're not meeting some sort of standard if they don't get pregnant and completely overwhelmed to begin with. Right. Then there's another gentleman, like the same freaking day, like within 5 minutes, I saw another one going, if your wife is coming up to you and saying, well, I don't like that, then you're already not leading your house right. If you were leading your house right, your wife would never, ever disagree with you. And I'm just sitting here going, oh, are they just trying to give me a stroke today? And of course, all I'm seeing here on these are reaction videos from people telling them to go shove something somewhere, but it's still out there.
Yeah.
It's like,
and part of it is a demonstration of incredible ignorance. I mean, the whole bit about women having children younger is scientifically encouraged for the good of the species, not necessarily the good of the individual or society as a whole. That's just a straight up biology thing. And we're talking into our mid 30s. There's a reason why at 35, any woman who's had children knows that's the magic year where suddenly we're old.
Yeah.
17 is nowhere near 35. So that's already, you got patriarchy, you've got bad scientific understanding, and you've got a treating the human world like every other species who are pretty much designed to eat, have sex, and die. Yeah. You know, humans do something different. And I'm sure a zoologist is going to be all over me on that one. But generally speaking, humans have other goals in life. As for the godly, the head of the household stuff, that is second generation, what we call Deuteropauline. That's straight out of around the 70s or 80s of the first century. These are not original people who were part of the first communities of Christian. These are like their grandchildren and great grandchildren who are living in the Gentile part of the world and who are still sucking back hard on the teat of Greek philosophy. That is straight up Plato and Aristotle.
Yep, absolutely.
And a lot of people do not know that when they're doing all this patriarchy ho-ha, they're not talking about the gospel. They're not talking about Jesus, who is incredibly egalitarian, given the context he was living in. We're talking people who don't realize how much Greek philosophy is actually in the Christian tradition.
Yes. So basically what they're doing is they're calling themselves Christians, but they're following the teachings of an actual pagan who is never even heard of Christ, because they were dead long before Christ was there.
And that's the complete irony. I mean, we have all of these images of God on a throne with thunderbolts and gonna just storm down on whoever. That's
you mean like Zeus?
Yeah, that's Zeus. And I look at people, it's like, you know what? That's not
wait a minute. Okay, wait a minute. So if Zeus is who they're following, then their idea of how women should be treated in the context of marriage makes a whole hell of a lot more sense.
Right?
Thank you, son.
And you have more sympathy for Hera and all the people that she went
I've always had more sympathy for Hera.
She wrongly blamed the women, but yeah, so it's a whole lot of ignorance. My father used to say that someone knows just enough to be dangerous. That's kind of where a lot of this stuff goes. And the word godly, just if anything, just kind of pricks my bubble. That's one of them. I was watching a probably a TikTok thing about makeup and godly makeup. And I'm like, honey, there are people starving in this world. There are wars that do not need to be happening. There are people who are homeless. Trust me when I tell you, God doesn't give a damn what kind of mascara you're using. That is so not God's concern. And they're talking very, very maturely and very honestly about what godly makeup is. And I'm like, oh my God. But the thing is, with all of this conversation, it is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. And just like our conversation when we first began this about hell, this whole thing about godly stuff is another distraction, and it's another opportunity to be self-absorbed and not pay attention to what the Gospels are actually saying. And I was having a conversation on Facebook with someone the other day, and they said something about these people claiming to be Christian. Can't believe they're doing this and still claim to be Christian. And I responded, that's because they're not actually Christian. And someone else who I don't know piped up and said, oh, but they are. Now, I had a lot more people jump on him and say, no, she nailed it. Yeah, no, they really are not. Because we've lost, a lot of these people have lost the central focus. We're not Christian because we're part of a religion. We're Christian because we follow Christ. And there are way too many people, both in the church bureaucracies and outside of them, that want to convince you that the religion and the faith are the same thing. And they're not. So religion, because it's got no soul, can go after this self-serving, self-indulgent, self-focused garbage and convince people to spend all of their lives navel-gazing to make God approve of them. Again, a very Grecian understanding of your relationship with the divine. Meanwhile, people who aren't getting a whole lot of attention, either because they just aren't or because they're busy doing other things, are following the faith of Jesus, not having a whole heck of a lot to do with the bureaucracies.
Exactly. And that's very interesting that you say that, because I heard someone say, I'm seeing a lot more of this, not just from people like you who are in the church, but from a lot of people who have left the church, who still say, this one girl saying she was in a very strict evangelical church here in the US, and she left it. And she says, when you do not follow the strict guidelines of what they say, you are suddenly against God. But if what they're saying does not follow God, and you don't, if you read the Bible and the Gospels say do this, and they're saying doing the exact opposite, then they're not following God either. And it's just like, a lot of people are catching up to this. A lot of people are deconstructing religion, and they're finding what is the BS and what is the core of it, which is what pagans are required to do. They're you can have the hierarchy, but you need to know what the core is. And so many Christians are doing this. It's like when the feminist movement in the 70s really hit its stride, in the 80s, there's a backlash, and I'm seeing the backlash from the church. The more people start deconstructing religion and really trying to figure out what the true meaning is and what they're really actually required to do, the more the established hierarchy, whatever that is in your life, seems to be starting to backlash and to attack more.
And surely that's the benefit of social media, is that we're now seeing that each other is doing. I mean, this work has been going on all the time for centuries now, but we now have formats where people can talk to people as opposed to going through some other source that's restricted and censored.
Which
so we're
is
seeing
why
that
they're
this is happening
trying
a lot more.
hard to gain control over the internet, because if people can't talk freely, they can't compare notes, and that makes
precisely
the job of someone who wants to oppress people a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why all sorts of establishments went after TikTok. I mean, I'm only slowly getting there, not because I don't respect it, but because I'm just overwhelmed by where I should be. But the people who've been there have been opening and educating a lot of minds and conversations, and it's fantastic. There are people that are able to do this. And I think what we are also seeing is a lot of people who grew up in that really restrictive thinking once they actually get a Bible in the hands. And this is something that is really important. The majority of right-wing Protestants, not Catholics or Orthodox, but Protestants, are still only reading tracts out of the King James Bible. So that is a few things. First of all, it takes things out of context. And as we're always saying, context is everything. So it takes passages out of context, for one. But secondly, it's writing them and reading them in a language that was fanciful 1,500 years ago. It's not how we speak today. So it's very easy to confuse people who are reading only the King James Version today, who don't have the background, like they don't speak the language that was done in Shakespearean's day. It's one of the reasons we treat Shakespeare like it's highfalutin and forget that it's all body political humor for the common people. But we have
jokes and cross-dressing.
Precisely. We incrementally remove people from the opportunity to read it for themselves. And yeah, I mean, there's things that need to be contextualized. Absolutely. I mean, that's 80% of my job is contextualizing how to understand the Bible. But you don't have to do it with all the parts. You know, don't have war, beat swords into plowshares. Like, that's really, really straight up. Don't be like the hypocrites who pray in public and want all the attention. You know, you don't need an interpreter for that part. Love others. You don't need an interpreter for that part. But the system, the establishment, the hierarchy, the ultimately the patriarchy of the church has designed a religious system that is designed to not have people engage the word and the faith directly. So we have all these intermediaries that make it difficult to see. If you kind of boil down the 1,000 years that it took to write the Bible as we see it today, then you are going to have one consistent message, and that is take care of each other. That's it. That's the message. And in order for the religion to succeed, it has got to be complicated. People gravitate towards complicated, I think, because they think there's something bigger. They have a real hard time with the simple. And I wish I understood what goes on in the human psyche that makes that true. But it does. And that's why the complicated keeps getting all of the attention, rather than being it boiled down. But once a person is can analyze that, can kind of assess that, then you're able to engage it a little bit better and see how simple, and simple is not easy, mind you, no, but how simple the message is. And by obsessing, I mean, I don't think that we are having the hell conversation like we used to. Now we're having the godly conversation. And it's the same muscles, just with different clothing on it. All of it's designed to separate people from figuring out their faith and their relationship with God. It's intentional, and it does not help anybody. It's kind of exciting now as you see all these people who are doing this work to separate it. That's why when people ask me if the church is dying, I say, okay, what? The institution? Absolutely. The faith? Not at all. And you can see that in the places where people are gathering.
Yes. But hasn't that always been the case? That, you know, when you try to contain something as basic to human nature as faith, and I'm sorry, even if you're an atheist, you have some sort of faith. You have faith that you're going to put your foot out of that bed and you're going to land it on a hard piece of wood or flooring, and you're going to stand up. You have faith that sun's going to rise in the morning. You know, the planet's going to continue. So everything we do in life is based on faith. Faith is the most natural thing to do. It's very hard to monetize and gain power from something that is easy and simple and natural.
That's true.
So if you want to gain power and you want to monetize something, you've got to make people believe it's complicated.
Yes. Yes,
and you've got to brainwash them from childhood to believe that it's complicated, generation after generation. The fact is, the message of the Bible, the message of most faiths is what we pagans say. Do what you will, but don't harm anybody. Don't harm anybody. Don't harm yourself. Don't harm the planet. Don't harm animals. Don't harm your fellow person. It's not that complicated. And if you can do something to make someone's life better, boom, you're ahead of the game. It really isn't that complicated. All the rules, all those picky things, those just get in the way of the basic message. And
but it's all about control, and it's limiting people's opportunity to have conversations outside of those in power. And those in power can't do that anymore, because social media has become a whole new reality that they can't control. They keep trying, but they can't.
Growing up Catholic, I never understood this idea that, and it wasn't everybody. Some people were more liberal, but the idea that you could live an absolutely spotless life, you could help the poor, you could be just as amazing a human being as has ever walked the planet, but if you're not baptized, you're not going to heaven. And when I would hear things like that, you know what my thing was, well, I don't want to go to heaven. I want to be with the people who are doing the good stuff. And if God is that petty, I don't want to be there. And it just never made sense to me. And as I got older,
the problem.
Yeah, and as I got older and I understood more of the politicism involved in all of it, it made more sense to me that they weren't telling the truth.
No, they aren't. And I mean, you've got a number of layers of that, of course. You've got the parish priests throughout history who have been relatively uneducated or lesser educated. Then you've got the people in the cities who are actually having these conversations that are at a far more open level, and they're the ones that are writing about their thoughts, but they haven't been taught, because it's not part of social consciousness at this time, about self-reflection. It's just not to be found in any document prior to the Enlightenment. And then come along the Enlightenment, and they blame all of these unenlightened people for not doing the thing that they didn't know they were supposed to do in the first place. And then you get a whole lot of people saying, well, religion did this to you. Like, on what planet does that make sense? But that was the accepted narrative. And that kind of has carried through. And a lot, if you think out logically, and I don't blame people for leaving the church when they start to realize the hypocrisy and the holes in the logic. Like, a lot of the things people are told in their congregations are just not right. I remember, oh my heavens, this is 30 years ago. This is how much I was shocked by this. I remember sitting at Christmas Eve service while the minister was preaching against the incarnation. And I'm sitting there thinking, Christmas Eve, like, if this is the one night that conversation shouldn't even be on the docket, because this is the night we celebrate incarnation, and you are just preaching to these people who have no background about how the incarnation is not a thing. Does not go together. And realizing how ill-educated this minister was. They got on some kind of bandwagon, got some kind of idea about whatever, but only, as my father used to say, a little bit of information made him dangerous. He thought he was cutting edge. I mean, this is in the middle of rural New Brunswick. No one's cutting edge. But he wanted to believe that he was bringing a new thought. And I'm like, dude, have you paid attention to the first centuries before they had all this stuff figured out? Everybody was having different opinions, including yours. You're not novel. You are a heretic, however. There's the lack of logic. I mean, when I get into playing theology and looking at the history of theology, that is me in nerd happy. That's me like in some kind of pig heaven. But that is not where faith grows. That's just a whole bunch of nerds sitting around, hopefully with a really good pint, being able to discuss things. That's our equivalent to watching playoff season. But if that is not a helpful experience for the majority of the people, they want to have something that they can work with on their lives, through their lives, something that makes sense. And I tell you, it's disappointing to me the number of times people will come to me and say, that makes so much more sense. No one has ever said that to me ever. And these are people older than I am. No one has ever said that to me. That is something I can work with. Like, I mean, hello, I had a lifetime of this person where you could have made the life of Christ a workable, functional thing. And what did you do with it? So yeah, I have a lot of
you have thoughts.
I have a lot of, and I've had a couple of conversations along these lines with other Christian academics. I've got a lot of disdain for the people who have been leading congregations for a long time, who don't pick up a book and don't kind of get caught up with what's ever gone, which makes it easier for people who are wanting to use faith as a weapon to do their thing. If you've got the liberal main church not standing up and saying that's garbage, and the right wing just saying, hey, we know the truth, that's not an even playing field.
And the congregation is kind of up in the air. They don't have anyone. It's hard because, like exactly you said, the majority of people are not nerds like you and me. I mean, I'm watching 5 different great courses on different things that will never, ever, ever help me in my normal life. And I don't care because I am so curious. I want to know. But the majority of people who are raising kids, who are working full-time jobs, sometimes 2 jobs, they don't have time to go and try to sort through religious texts or journals or things like that are going to help them with this. They need practical measures.
Precisely.
It's not that people are dumb, is they just don't have enough time.
No, they don't. And when they come across someone who is going to say, all you have to do is practice A, practice B, practice C, you're fine. That's really seductive. It doesn't make a difference to them whether or not this is acceptable theology or not, because they don't know necessarily, they haven't had these conversations. They've never been encouraged to challenge and question.
Well,
never.
I think
that is the damage done, but that's how you control people.
Yeah, well, that's
too much
one of the reasons people like us are on the planet, because we're going to question, and I'm going to encourage everybody I know to question. Be that obnoxious person who asks the difficult questions. You may not, your preacher or your teacher or whatever may not like you, but at least you'll ask the questions. Don't ever be afraid to ask the questions, because anyone who gives you hell for asking a question that they can't answer is not the person you want to be learning from anyway.
Precisely. I was told twice on Sunday. I was called to preach a passage that I just do not like at all. And I let them know I don't like this, and feeling rather kind of pissy that this is what I basically feel the Spirit was moving to me towards. And when I was done, I had a couple of women come up to me later, and they said, you made me think. And one of them was so happy. She said, you made me think. And the other one was, damn it, now I'm gonna have to use my brain again. You made me think. And she did it in a comical way, and I took it as comedy. But yeah, if you're not pushing those boundaries and making people think, it's really easy to walk out of there without having anything that you need to wrestle with in your own lives. And that's just not what we've been asked to do. We're asked to be really uncomfortable with some of this stuff and really look at ourselves. Are we measuring up? Of course not. There's a reason why we have in Christian churches why we have a practice of confession. And I'm always kind of stunned when I see people in leadership who want to remove that because they don't like the way it makes people feel. It's like, honey, that is the point. You get that back in there. That's one of the essentials in Christian worship, the acknowledgement that we have the standard and we're not measuring up, and we know we're not measuring up. So if you confuse that standard by a whole lot of expectations that don't have anything to do with Jesus' ministry, then how are people possibly going to find their way back? How are they possibly going to understand what is the value and what is not? The self-servingness to that level of distraction, my heart would break if I wasn't so nauseated by these to-do lists about what makes yourself a good Christian person that has nothing to do with what Christ was actually about.
Damn. It's I'm going to have to really think of a title for this one, because we have just gone all the way across the board here.
Yeah.
How about the ungodly episode? Because the ungodliness episode.
Yeah, that works.
Because seriously, it's just this idea of putting these artificial expectations on people when the real work is so obvious and so simple.
Yep, and important.
This idea of obfuscating the
Yep. Well, often I tell people, back in the story of Cain and Abel, where Cain gets really annoyed, and when God says, "Where's your brother?" after he's just killed him, and Cain says, "Who am I, my brother's keeper? Or am I my brother's keeper?" The answer to that is yes. Mm-hmm. And I tell people that, and they just kind of look at me for a bit. It's like, right, yes, of course. We are supposed to take care of each other. It doesn't matter what products we buy. I mean, yeah, you can go into a whole ethical conversation about what is better for the environment, what is better for humans, do we need them in the first place? But that pushed aside, the triviality of modernity is not what is going to be of concerning to God.
No.
Whether you have a parking place is not what is concerning to God. Whether you are wearing the appropriate colors and the appropriate seasons is not of concern to God. What's concerning to God, and the Bible lays it out plain, and I think other faiths do too, are we taking care of each other? Or are we making the world as good as it can be? And are we understanding that we are all equally deserving? You're not saying yes to every single one of these, then you're not doing the godly thing. And it has nothing to do with your purchasing power.
Do what you will and you harm none.
Yep.
I mean, it's scary sometimes when you really pull away all the bullshit, how similar our faiths are.
Yeah, they really are.
It's just trappings that make us different. And I think pretty much every legitimate faith on the planet, and new and old, want to make the world a better place and want to make people's lives better. I think that is the commonality of religion.
Absolutely. Yep.
Look at us coming to terms. We are forming a conference here. I love it.
Absolutely.
So we are pretty much almost out of time. I may have to cut it a little short today because I got to get ready for work, because I guess who's doing overtime again this week?
Well, it is the weekend, so I got to get ready for work too.
All right, my friend. It has, as always, been a lovely time talking to you, Deb Sutter in Canada, and I'm Deb Bodwin in Arizona, USA. Any other final remarks, my friend?
No, just take care, work hard, and I'll talk to you again.
You too. Thank you guys for joining us. Preacher and the Pagan. We'll see you next month.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to The Preacher and the Pagan with Deborah Suttard and Deborah Bodwin. This podcast is a two-lady podcast production in conjunction with the Barefoot Evangelist. Our producer and sound editor is Catherine Gordon. Our theme music was composed by Deborah Bodwin. You can reach us at thepreacherandthepagan@gmail.com or by visiting our website at barefootevangelist.ca/podcast.